All right, it's recording now. Let me know when you're ready.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. Hey everyone, my name is Simon Yu. I am now officially starting a podcast, and I've just met some interesting people throughout my time. I've met entrepreneurs, politicians, I've met founders and billionaires, and I've just been learning a lot. And then just been coming from a background of immigrant parents and not having much to start with. It's been really fascinating just to be able to learn from really smart people. So I wanted to start this off just by being able to interview some really cool people. And my first guest, Sam Cho, who I've known for a long time. He's got a pretty interesting background. He comes from politics, entrepreneurship, and definitely let him talk about himself. But yeah, he's got some fascinating stories. So I'm glad to have him on. So thanks, Sam, for coming on.
Thanks, Simon, for having me. I'm really excited and honored to be your first guest.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I'll just introduce myself. My name is Sam Cho. I currently serve as the commissioner at the Port of Seattle, which is an elected position. So that's the political angle. I am raised in Seattle, Washington, much like Simon, and spent several years in Washington, D.C. I served in the Obama administration. But I also founded a company called Seven Seas Export several years ago, which was an export and trading company in the agricultural space. And that's right around when Trump was in office. It was an interesting time. And so ever since then, I ran for office. I serve right now. So yeah,
Yeah, so you gotta tell us that story. So, yeah, I think, yeah, you were working for Obama, and then his presidency ended,
that's
and
right.
then now you're like, okay, I'm out of the job. I could go into lobbying, but then you decided to start an import-export business,
That's
and
right.
you started selling eggs. And that story to me was extremely fascinating, just because I know all the crap that you had to go through
Yeah, man.
while you were doing that, and that's like the heart of entrepreneurship. Just because like
Right.
people don't realize, like, man, when you start something, you're gonna fail, and there's so many
That's right.
weird circumstances that happen,
Totally.
and something you can't control. But you just like, man, you figured it out, and you found some creative solutions. But you got to tell us that
Yeah.
egg story.
All right. Yeah. So go back to 2016. Hillary Clinton had just lost the presidency. Trump was about to be sworn in. I was working for President Obama. And as a political appointee, you don't stay beyond the presidency that you were appointed for, obviously, unless they ask you to stay. So obviously, Trump didn't ask me to stay. So I was out of the job, unemployed. I was on unemployment benefits. And I was looking for a job, and it was tough job market because if you could think back to then, no one wanted to hire an Obama person.
Mm.
Everyone was looking for Trump people. But in the political space, there were no Trump people because Trump is not traditionally a political guy. And then if you think about like where we were politically, the Democrats didn't have Congress, so we didn't have the House or the Senate. So there was like thousands of Obama people like me who were looking for a job in a market that was not friendly towards us. So a lot of my friends went into lobbying. They went back to their hometowns and started working in state and local politics. But what I thought was like, well, why don't I've always, wanted to try entrepreneurship and start my own company. Well, this is as good as time as the time than ever. And you understand this, Simon, but like, I think there are two types of entrepreneurs: those who are start from nothing and have nothing to lose, right? And so you have that hustle mentality, and you're like, you know what, F it, we're just gonna do this and see how it goes. And I feel like you and I are cut from that cloth. And then there are those who maybe come from an entrepreneurial family or a more privileged family where they have a nice cushion where they can kind of just run with something and then afford to fail so that they have a backup plan. And I was definitely in the latter at that point. And so towards the end of the administration, I noticed that there was a big bird flu outbreak in Asia. It made world news where like avian influenza was running rampant in China, in Korea, in Taiwan, in Japan. And what happened was this bird flu wiped out all these chickens. So these chickens were dying. And as a result of a shortage of chickens, countries like Korea had a shortage of eggs. So egg prices went from like $3 a carton of eggs to $10 a carton. And I saw that. And of course, like my brain was like, can I arbitrage this? Right. So I legit drove to Costco and I looked at how much a 36 pack of eggs cost. And it was only like $4. And I was like, oh man, there might actually be an arbitrage window here.
Mhm.
So I ended up like cold calling a bunch of egg farms across the country. And it just so happened the egg farm that supplies Costco was the first one to kind of return my call. And it was called Wilcox Farms. You and I grew up on eating Wilcox Farms. Um, it's a
I had
really
no
great,
idea.
yeah, I mean, it's a staple. It's a staple. It's a family-owned business. They're really great people. They called me and I was like, "Hey, look, I have this. There's this opportunity in Asia. Would you be interested in exporting?" And these guys literally, like, his response was, "Who the hell are you?" Right? And I was like, I had to explain myself. I worked in the Obama administration. I did some trade policy back in the day. Like, I know this is an opportunity. He gave me a chance. So I had these eggs that they were willing to sell me. I went to Korea to buy a bunch of to find a bunch of buyers. And so I finally found some buyers, supermarkets, small chain supermarkets, and I put them on a pallet, put the eggs on a pallet, put them in an airplane, and shipped them to Korea. A complete disaster for all the obvious reasons, right? Eggs are fragile, they have a short life. So when I got there, they all cracked, like the yolk was
Oh,
everywhere. It was a
no.
complete disaster, bro. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, no wonder no one is doing this. This is like logistically impossible. Right. So I was really close to giving up and saying, okay, this is a failure. It's not going to work. Um, and then I thought about it and I was like, how can I make this work? And so what I did is I pivoted my strategy from a B2C strategy, a business to consumer strategy, like supermarkets where you and I would go buying eggs, to a B2B strategy. So the difference is if you think about businesses that use eggs, it's like a bakery, a confectionery, a
Mhm.
restaurant. And the difference is they use the eggs as an ingredient. They don't
Mhm.
sell eggs. So why does that matter? It matters because they crack the eggs anyway
Mhm.
to make the bread or whatever.
Mhm.
So my idea was, why don't I crack them stateside in the
Mhm.
US and ship the eggs in their liquid state to Korea? That
Mhm.
way it's no longer a logistical challenge. Like
Right.
cracking the eggs breaking on the way doesn't matter. So that's exactly what I did. I actually told my farms, let's crack these eggs. Let's put them in basically these vacuum sealed plastic
Mhm.
bags, vacuum seal them, put them in pails, and ship them. And now I can ship them like ocean freight because I can put
Mhm.
them in refrigerated containers.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when I first did this, it was a huge hit because all these bakeries can now just rip open these bags of eggs, right, and throw it in with the batter,
Right.
right? It was a huge hit. They didn't need some guy cracking eggs all day or a machine to
Yeah.
crack eggs.
So what you did was, like, versus in the past, like, bakeries had to crack open these eggs one by
Yeah,
one, and it would take hours for them to crack
yeah,
open, like, hundreds of eggs a day, right?
right,
And
right.
then you basically just help them save several hours, and you turn this.
Labor, yep. It
Yeah.
was a value add product.
So
I
so you
saved them
turn
labor costs. It
so
was
you
pretty
turn kind of
amazing.
a weakness that you had in your logic, your business logic, and then you turn that into a strength,
That's
which is
right.
pretty awesome.
That's
Yeah.
right. It was an inefficiency that spurred an idea to make it more
Mhm.
efficient, essentially.
Yeah.
And so in 2 years of doing this business, I exported 2.5 million pounds from the
Wow.
US. I ended up sourcing from not just Washington, but, Estherville, Iowa, Thompsonville, New York, Gainesville,
Mhm.
Georgia, like some of the
Mhm.
biggest eggs farms in America.
Yeah.
And now it's a standard product. Now, like everyone, all the egg farms do it.
Oh, wow.
But so, like, as the middleman, my kind of my it was another lesson in business. It's like, it's hard to be the middleman,
Mhm.
because the farms can now just sell it directly to the
Mhm.
businesses, which is fine. Like, I got out of the business at the perfect time, sold my
Mhm.
contracts when I got elected.
Mhm.
Um, but at the time, it was a pretty new idea. And the other part thing is, how do you take one product and create a flywheel to create multiple products, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so what I ended up doing is I took an egg and I would separate the egg whites and the egg yolk.
Mhm.
And so now I can sell egg whites and egg yolk. Egg yolks go to mayonnaise manufacturers. Egg whites go to, I don't know, ice cream manufacturers. So now I
Oh,
have three
interesting.
products based on one.
Hmm. I didn't know. You could sell those individually too, or that mayonnaise was
Yeah.
just purely
We
yolk instead of huh,
we had
that's
a
interesting.
machine that cracked the eggs and it
Yeah,
spun the eggs. And because the egg yolk is more dense than the egg white, the egg yolk would just pop out.
gotcha.
Yeah, and so
And
you can
did you
sell the
have
egg
to
white.
invest the capital in those machines, or was it the farms that was doing that,
So,
or
the machines, the egg farms are the ones that put in the like capital for the machines
Yeah.
because actually, if you go to the supermarket now in the US, you can buy milk cartons with egg
Yeah.
whites. Like if you're
Yeah.
an athlete, sometimes you just or like Costco, you can get egg white and milk cartons with egg whites,
Huh.
right? Those are actually those machines use those egg whites. And here's another thing about this business that was insane. Most people don't know this, but eggs don't get laid like when a chicken lays an egg, they're not all the same
Mhm.
size,
Mm.
right? But when you buy eggs in a carton, they're all the same size. That's because the
Right.
government regulates the size of the eggs.
Interesting.
Okay. So what does that matter to my business? Because all the eggs that are too big or too small, they get thrown out. They can't go to
Oh,
market. So,
yeah.
but why do I care? I crack them anyways, right?
Right, right, right,
So I buy all the reject eggs at below market price.
right.
I crack them, I package them, make them a premium product. So the margin, there's always a margin of safety in the product because I will
Mm.
always buy the eggs at below market, and
Yeah.
then I would create a value add product. And so
Gotcha.
there's always that arbitrage window.
Yeah.
And so that was another way that I made the business work because I actually bought reject eggs, eggs
Gotcha.
that were too small, too big, that the farms couldn't use to go to market. I
Yeah.
would crack them and I would create this new product.
Gotcha. Wow, I never even thought of, like, egg sizes, just
Right?
being all different, and yeah, I remember, there was a trendy thing, it was, like, ugly produce or something where it was like
Imperfect
the
foods. Imperfect
imperfect
food.
foods, right?
Yeah.
That's starting to do really well, right?
Yeah.
But it's kinda
Yeah,
that
like, they're
concept of
perfectly good food, but they're like they don't go to
yeah,
market because 'cause they're ugly.
right, and it's such a,
It's a waste.
capitalistic kind of fault of,
Totally.
sort of how our world runs, and yeah, I remember back I can't say which company, but, yeah, one of the companies I worked for, and they saw their, food warehousing companies, and then, they were just dumping out so much fresh food just
Yeah,
because
dude.
they had, like, a little bruise or, like, or something on the
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
"Why can't we just donate to these homeless people?" And
Like
then
exactly. If you
yeah,
have a
and just
cherry that doesn't have a stem, it's, like, no good,
right,
right? It's
but
crazy. Yeah, some of
but
the specificate like, the conditions that food gets thrown out are ridiculous.
yeah. No, but, I mean, yeah, when I asked the VP, like, "Why can't we just, donate this to charity?" And the response was, like, "Unfortunately, US justice system and, like, the legal system, there's no good Samaritan law, so if someone gets sick from eating that food, they can say,
That's
"Oh,
right.
we got sick from" it's really unfortunate. There should be some sort of, yeah, good
Leeway.
Samaritan law that that protects companies from being able to at least donate, somewhat decent food,
Yeah,
that
I
has good
agree.
standards and that would cure, hunger and
Yeah,
just I can't believe yeah, it's just, it's just some of the things and how the world works sometimes, but
yeah.
anyway, that's yeah, so that's really interesting. So, I mean, like, also getting rid of the eggshells probably from, like, a shipping cost must have been lowered significantly, right?
Yes, it's a
So you
lot
save
lighter.
costs there. Yeah.
Actually, well, the funny thing I learned after the fact was, like, eggshells are, like, 99% protein and calcium.
Yeah.
Like, the shells are pretty nutrient, and
Mm.
so, if I had continued my business, I probably would have taken the eggshells, turned it into powder,
Mm.
and sold them to, like, makeup manufacturers because they like the calcium for, like
Interesting.
for makeup.
Wow.
So, I probably if I had time, I probably would have done that as a
Gotcha.
secondary business. Yeah, the
So
eggshells are very, very nutritious.
like, I mean, you were into politics and you knew absolutely nothing about eggs or farming. Like, your parents weren't farmers or anything, right?
No,
You knew
no.
absolutely nothing. So that's the, the super fascinating thing, and it's very similar to my first, taco business too. Like, I didn't know anything about, running a taco truck or anything like that, but just
Yeah,
kept, figuring out problems and figuring out how to scale, further, and then just kept,
yeah,
pivoting every time there was trouble. But yeah, that's really interesting. So why did you, eventually, stop that business and,
yeah.
you're back into politics now. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, I've always had a passion for public service.
mm,
I think maybe, part of me thinks it's because I grew up in the church and I've always
mm,
just been taught to serve. And I felt like politics or policy was kind of the biggest and fastest way I can make a widespread impact.
mm,
And so, shaping laws, regulations, helping people, creating laws that help people. That's kind of what drew me into public policy and politics. And so, I started my career in public policy, working for a member of Congress, working for Obama, and yeah, I did this business for a few years. But what's interesting here is that um, I used the experience from my egg business to go back into politics, and I think this is
mm,
a very important thing. Is that like everyone's very black and white in their careers. Like if I'm private sector, I'm private sector. If
Mhm.
I'm public sector, I'm public sector. But the
Mhm.
reality is that there is this symbiotic relationship, right? Like you and I were just talking about how the crypto space is going to become regulated,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
so um, you can only go for so long with this disconnect between industry and the public sector. And so I think it's a healthy for any country to have like professionals like yourself and myself in the private sector to go back to go into government or public policy to shape good policies, right? That
Mhm.
create safeguards, but also help foster the industry, right? And when you have a bunch of inexperienced people who don't understand blockchain crypto, that's when you end up with really bad laws that really
Yep.
stunt the growth of the industry, right? And I know you
Yep.
understand this, and I understand it because as someone who was in international trade and export, I had to deal with some really antiquated like product specification and
Yeah.
customs laws that were like, why the heck am I still faxing stuff to people?
Right.
Right? Like, why does this need to be a physical copy? Right? Why can't I just send a PDF or a DocuSign? Right? There's
Yeah.
still laws out there that are so old,
Right.
and so in 2019, when the Port of Seattle commission position opened up, a lot of
Mhm.
people called me and say, "Hey, you've done this. You've done on the ground trade and exports. If
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
became a port commissioner, you'd be the most experienced, most qualified in ever,
Mhm.
right? In recent
Gotcha.
memory, and you can do things at the port that other people who are probably just looking for a title or trying to take up space would
Yeah.
never do." And so
Yeah.
that was kind of the nexus there. And it's like, okay, you're right. I've been in politics. I worked for Obama. I did policy, but I'm also an entrepreneur who understands the
Mhm.
trade space. And so running for the port and serving as a port commissioner would actually make a lot of sense. And so that's why I
Gotcha.
ended up running, man. And I think a lot of the voters who
Yeah.
voted for me in King County, I think they agreed. Obviously, I won,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, as a crypto entrepreneur, like the uncertainty of the regulations is definitely one of the biggest challenges that I face. Just
Yeah.
because, man, just from like I mean, it's like there's so many different departments that are trying to, just regulate this thing. Like SEC is calling
SEC,
it
IRS.
security, and then you
Oh,
have
yep,
FINRA,
yep,
FinCEN, IRS is a property.
yep.
Just yeah, just so many different departments, and then even the SEC laws is from 1933. Like
Yeah,
do
dog.
we even have like people were
Ridiculous.
just learning it, and there were cars back then, and like the people were still riding horses. It's just
Yeah.
ridiculous, like
The-
how
I,
outdated everything is.
I actually wanted to ask you this because I think regulations of the crypto space is inevitable, and I know
Yeah,
SEC and stuff and stuff. Do you think the regulations will like when the SEC announces like crypto regs? Do you think the market will go down or up initially in the short run?
I think. I mean, I think it's gonna be dependent on what how the bills come out and the
Yeah, that's
policies. Like
fair.
there were some recent bills that were about to be passed or whatever. But it's probably gonna get rejected, but it would make everybody in the crypto space a broker-dealer. And,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
it's just impossible to run the business that way.
yeah,
But, I mean, if something like that were to pass, like, that's
yeah,
obviously a huge, negative on crypto. But, I mean,
yeah,
it's at the same time, a lot of the entrepreneurs are really smart, so
yeah.
if something like that were
They'll
to
figure it
happen,
out.
everyone's just going to Singapore. Like, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's just peop there's gonna be a mass exodus to Singapore, and US is gonna lose $1 trillion asset class, and it's just I don't think that's the direction they want. And it's surprisingly a lot of senators and mayors and governors are now into crypto, and they
yeah.
understand
Like
that
Jared
it's
Polis, and I mean Jared Polis
yeah.
has been in the crypto space for years. He created a blockchain caucus in Congress when I was working in Congress. That's
Mhm.
2014. Like
Yeah.
he's been ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and there's so many more now, and it's just
Yeah.
yeah, they're starting to realize that 90% of the folks have good intentions
Yep.
and are not trying to do an exit scam or something, and really
Right.
have found something with, a
Right.
futuristic tech that has a lot of potential to really be able
Yeah.
to evolve
It's
something, and
just that
well,
10%,
it's gonna
man,
create
that
a lot of
ruins it for
jobs.
the rest, dude.
Yeah, and that 10% really pisses me off personally too,
Yeah.
because those scammers and you know, stupid, like all
Squid
the
coins.
exit scammers and all this stuff. Yeah, it's just all these random coins. I can't name, specific ones, but,
Yeah.
I get
I
grilled every
will.
time. Yeah, those guys go after me every time I say something on Twitter or
Yeah.
something like that. But anyway, but it's just like that always gets on the news, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah, it's not
10%,
the
the
good
bad
stuff.
stuff always
Yeah,
gets on the news, and then it's
yeah,
just like, "Hey, my friend made 10,000x because of blah," or like
yeah,
that shouldn't be the focus of,
yeah,
what
yeah,
we're trying to
yeah,
build.
totally.
But
totally.
Unfortunately,
I
that's what
actually
gets
think
a lot of the views in Wall Street Journal and stuff. So,
yeah, yeah. In my perspective, in the short run, if there was mass regulations of crypto, the market might tank because they're afraid of what those regulations might be.
mhm.
But on the other hand, think about it this way: the fact that the government is regulating it is a validation of the technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? It's a
Yeah.
validation. So in the long run, I believe it's a good thing because the
Yeah.
fact that the government has to acknowledge this and regulate it makes it legit. It makes it mainstream and it'll actually kill, or at least the goal should be to get rid of the 10% that are scammers, right? That's
Yeah.
really that should be the
Yeah.
goal, is to get rid of the
Yeah.
scammers and leave the 90% that are doing good and creating value.
Yeah.
And so I think in the long run it's a good thing. But you're
No,
right.
I'm definitely the same way.
It
Yeah.
depends it
No.
depends on the law,
Yeah.
which is why I think we need more competent people in the blockchain space to be in the
Exactly.
rooms where these regulations are being created.
So to your point of like, you had that experience of running your egg company, and then
Mhm,
now you're the politician that understands both sides of the business. And then
mhm.
similarly, I think we need more, politicians that understand,
Yeah,
how crypto companies work, etc. And I'm glad there are more. So I am bullish on America. Like America,
yeah,
has really adopted crypto. I mean, in 2022,
yeah.
so much more than when I started in 2014. And like everybody thought this was some
Dude,
money laundering, like drug smuggling thing. So
dude, I
we've evolved
remember
so
when
much.
you and I first met, we were at the chicken place on the Ave,
Yeah,
and you were showing me your, Cake Codes app,
yeah,
when you were running Cake Codes, man. You're an OG, bro. Like,
yeah,
seriously, that was, like, 7, 8 years ago when no one was
yeah,
in this space, and you were giving out free Bitcoin and Ethereum at the time, and
yeah,
then man, dude, it's crazy how far you've come. It's awesome.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah, like you said, just in the long run, it is good, and I'm very pro regulation too. We have to work with, government and regulators to make sure that we
Yeah,
create the best and make sure that normal people also get protected too. But
for
yeah,
sure.
just it's super interesting. Yeah, and like how you got back into politics, and then what's sort of your end goal, towards being in politics? Like, do you want to try to run for president? You want to be governor or mayor, or
Oh man, president's a tall order, bro. That's a pretty big commitment. And I mean, if you've seen those pictures of presidents after their
yeah,
term, they age like 50 years in like
yeah,
4. It's crazy.
right,
Like I don't know, there's a lot of things that need to happen for me before I even like think about that. I'm not married yet. I don't have a family, obviously, and
hmm,
but I will say that if the circumstances allow for it, I'd like to keep serving in this public office or elected
mm,
capacity and keep moving up the ladder. So whether it's running for
hmm,
Congress or moving up to the U.S. Senate, I'm always
hmm,
open to and looking for that opportunity. But I've actually, to be honest, I can see myself going back into entrepreneurship at some point as well. I haven't closed the
hmm,
door on that, and I told you earlier, like I feel like I have a calling to public service. Like I want to serve and do good. But there are a lot of ways to do that, right? To serve
hmm,
people in society, and it's not just
hmm,
being. You don't. I don't have to be a politician. I don't have to be in government, right? Like some people go into politics because they like titles and they want to be in politics. Like I do it because I
hmm,
want to serve. And if you create a company with a great mission and that can help people, sometimes you can have a greater impact that way than being a politician, right? It all just depends. So I'm pretty open to whatever opportunities present themselves. And so who knows? Like, my ideal career would be someone who kind of goes back and forth, right? I started in politics, I did business, I'm back in kind of elected office now. And if I can somehow leverage my experience right now in trade to maybe do something in the future in create a business that makes the international trade space more efficient, maybe through blockchain or whatever, then
hmm,
I'm totally open to doing that.
hmm,
um, so I'm pretty flexible. I'm pretty open to it, but right now my commitment and my focus is definitely on the public policy space and how
hmm.
far up I can go in the space. There's not a lot
Gotcha.
of us Asians in politics.
Yeah.
Like I feel like Andrew Yang kind of blew up right in the last year or
Hmm.
two, and that was great. But even Andrew Yang, like he hasn't won an election, right? He's more of a
Yeah.
celebrity than a real elected. So hopefully we'll kind of get that breakthrough here in the next few years.
Gotcha. So what about President candidate Yang, was it that you hope to see, improve
Yeah.
or something like that? Like, what was it, that you were
I think
talking about?
Andrew's like Achilles heel as a candidate was that he
Mhm,
kind of just parachuted into the scene.
mhm,
Like there's a saying in politics, all politics is local, right? And you can't just it's I don't know if you remember back in if you watched Fast and the Furious back in the day where
mhm,
he goes and challenges Toretto to a quarter mile race, and the guy
mhm.
and one of the guys goes, "You can't just jump in the ring with Muhammad Ali because you think you can box, right?"
Yeah.
And that resonates with me so often because a lot of people jump into politics thinking they can just like run,
Mhm,
right? And yeah, of course, anyone can run, but it's another thing to win.
mhm,
And Andrew Yang is a guy who had great ideas. He was very articulate and smart,
mhm,
but he had no real like campaign or political experience.
mhm,
And more importantly, he didn't have the strong foundation for a political candidate. Like there are institutions that have been in the political space, people who have been doing this for a really long time, who just it's like you've been in the crypto space for what, like 8 years now, at
mhm,
least,
mhm,
right? And if I told you one day that I'm going to start a company in the crypto space, like who are you going to bet on?
mhm,
Like I would rather bet on Sam and you, who's been doing this for 8 years, than the guy who just decided to do this yesterday, right?
mhm, mhm,
It's like any other, um, private sector venture, right? Do you have a track record,
mhm,
right? And the guy ran for president as
mhm,
his first like political thing, right? Like
mhm,
it's not
mhm,
like he started small and worked his way up. He has the credentials and okay, he's legit, right? Like the guy literally ran for the highest office in the country from the
mhm,
get-go with no
mhm,
political experience. And even though he had great talking points,
mhm,
like there was no faith in his ability to actually work the system and like
mhm.
do these things, right?
Gotcha.
And so I think it would and even
But you
running.
know who else had that and won president? President Trump. So,
Yeah, well, Trump was a multi-billionaire. Well, so
yeah,
so that's the thing, though. Everyone thinks Trump had no political experience, but Trump has
yeah.
been donating to politicians for decades and decades and
B
decades.
but I mean, yeah, I mean, donation versus actually
Yeah.
having experience and credentials to run it I think are 2 different things though, right?
Right, right. No, no, no. Yeah, exactly. So like, dude, credentials don't matter anymore in politics. Like that's one thing that I think everyone has learned. Like, and I'm not saying that I actually think Andrew Yang was qualified to run for president because he's an
Mhm,
entrepreneur. He had great ideas.
mhm,
The problem is he didn't have the foundation within political circles
mhm,
to make that jump.
mhm,
Right? Dude, like anything else, it's an insider's game.
mhm,
We call it the establishment, right? We
mhm,
call it the establishment, and Andrew Yang was the outsider, right? He was not the insider,
mhm,
right? That's the reason why Bernie Sanders hasn't won the presidency because even though he's like a celebrity in political circles, he's an outsider,
mhm,
right? There's an insider's game, and the reason I think one of the reasons that Trump won is because the Republican Party didn't denounce him. You notice like how can Republicans not speak out against what Trump is doing, right? It's
mhm,
because Trump has them in their pocket. Like
mhm,
he's been donating and schmoozing to these politicians for 40, 50 years,
mhm,
right? And so it's hard for you to kind of stand up to a guy who's been donating millions of dollars for so
mhm,
long, right?
mhm,
And Andrew Yang just didn't have that track record, that
mhm,
insider game track record. Um, and so it's easy to say, yeah, Andrew's all talk.
mhm,
He has no real clout. Whereas Donald Trump, like he has pictures with he like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton that he used to his advantage, right? Like
yeah,
he talks about these politicians like they're friends
yeah,
because they were his friends. He donated to all of them, right? Like he has connections to everyone, right? And so that was Trump's power is like
mhm,
his marketing. I think for all the things that Trump is bad,
yeah,
I think he's a genius marketer, right? And his network, right?
yeah,
As a multi-billionaire, the network that he has just paid dividends, right?
mhm,
And at the end of the day, that's what won him the presidency. It's kind of where Andrew was lacking.
mhm, gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I mean, you worked in the Democratic office, and right now, President Biden's approval rating is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
What do
Sad.
you think there's areas of improvement on, or
Yeah.
what are your takes on that right now?
You know, I think we need a lot more empathy in our society today. We need to put ourselves in each other's shoes and understand each other's perspectives. Um, I think it's funny because I think the irony of technology and social media and the internet is
Mm,
that we've all become much more connected as a society, but we've also become much more siloed as a
mm,
society. We're far more tribal today than we ever were before.
yeah.
And I'll give you like there's an essay by a good friend of mine, one of my mentors, and he wrote about pedophilia. And I promise you, this isn't like a weird like he basically said, and he wrote this in like 1994.
Mhm,
And basically, with the advent of internet and things like social media, pedophilia in our society will get worse, not better. And I remember thinking, what the heck is this guy talking about? And basically, he said before the internet, a pedophile was isolated in his own little world, right? And a society would say pedophilia is wrong. So that would actually suppress his, you know, pedophilic, his pedophilic, tendencies. But with the internet, and with social media, you now have the pedophile in Texas that can all of a sudden connect with the pedophile in New York, who can
yeah,
connect with the pedophile in Seattle, right?
yeah,
So you broke down the geographic barriers that allow for people, like-minded individuals,
yeah,
or people with the same biases to become to validate each other.
right,
And when you validate each other in that sense, you become empowered and say, "Oh, I'm not. I guess I'm not as weird as I thought. There's all these other people
right,
who feel the same way as I do." And so he was saying, because of the internet and social media, things are going to get worse.
yeah,
And I think that's exactly what's playing out right now in politics and in media, where like you have a thought or you have an idea, and you seek out people who have the same idea and thought,
right,
and all of a sudden there's this otherness where like if you're not with this crew, then you're weird, you're wrong.
yeah,
And that's what's contributing to so much of the polarization that we're seeing in our society, whether it's masks, vaccines, or even politics, or the politicization of all that stuff. Like the internet has connected us so much better, but that has also turned into a double-edged sword where
yeah,
the extremes have exploded.
right.
And so that's why
Have
I
you
say
seen
we need
that?
more empathy. What's that?
Have you seen that Netflix documentary?
uh,
Social. Oh gosh, I can't
I
remember
know
what
what you're
it is,
talking about.
but
I'm because the algorithms, you're talking about the
yeah.
algorithms and
So
how they
it's
just
like
feed you the same whatever
right,
you
like
like.
so as a society, we used to just all rely on news and media, like or just people being face to face to hear sort of thoughts. But then now it's just like you know very two extreme groups, and it's just like
Totally.
how could that side think of a certain topic this way when it's
Yeah.
totally obvious that it should be this way, but it's because the algorithms are constantly
Feeding.
yeah, feeding off of whatever you
Yep.
believe. It's just
Yep.
more and more of that, whether
Yep.
it's right or wrong. And
Yep. All it takes is
that's
one
just good.
like.
Yeah. And then
You like
so
the wrong imagine like you like one thing. It's like Aaron
yeah,
Rodgers, and he basically just watched the wrong YouTube video.
yeah.
That's all it is. Like he just watched the wrong 2 minute YouTube
Yeah,
video, and he went down this rabbit hole of like being skeptical of the vaccine. Like that's the society
yeah,
we live in now. It's crazy. You have to be careful about what you
yeah.
consume.
For
It's
me,
crazy.
it's like, man, like the one thing weird thing that, I watched was like a Dr. Pimple Popper. I don't know, it's like
Oh
somewhat
yeah,
very
yeah, it's kinda sad.
satisfying, like when
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
pop the
yeah,
pimples.
yeah,
Then when I watched that once, it's just like there's like 10 videos on like all these like, zit popping videos and like,
yeah.
booger, just
Your
extractions
queue
and all
fills
this.
up with all the videos that are just like that one, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just
Yeah, and that's how
but
people
yeah,
fall into
not on
conspiracy
extreme.
theories and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it just compounds.
Yeah.
And
No,
and so
it's pretty wild. Yeah,
it's
I was
pretty
catching
crazy.
up with a buddy of mine from high school, and, yeah, his views are very extreme, and he was just
Mm,
yeah, he was on a whole new world, and,
mm, mm,
it was very tough, and because it was very yeah, it was interesting because, like, we had very similar, ideologies and,
mhm,
beliefs and
mhm.
stuff like that, like, this is, like, 20 years ago, but still, it's amazing how much that's changed because of the internet, like, to your point, but so yeah, because of so you're saying the internet is at fault for, all-time low. Then, I mean, that's the case, then it's not just President Biden, it could happen to any president that
Yep.
happens, going
I
forward.
think that Trump was
That's
the
what you're saying.
same thing, Trump I think the tail end of Obama,
Mhm.
it's just the nature of the technology we have, and I think there's a lot of valid concerns around how these algorithms work
Yeah.
and whether or
So you're
not
blaming
they're
it
hurting.
all on the tech companies.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, like the Googles
Yeah,
and the Facebooks of this world, the
yeah,
scrutiny on Twitter, I mean,
yeah,
I think it's fair,
yeah.
So we'll see.
For me, I do feel there's a big influence on, Russia or China, whoever it is, like, creating fake
Oh,
bot
yeah.
accounts and, like, trying to influence decisions. There was
Yep.
also one thing that I read where it was like, if post 7 people post something on your thread,
Mhm.
then people believe that it's like a true
Oh,
statement kind
yeah,
of thing. So it's like,
yeah. It's just
this
repetition.
person, yeah, this
Yeah,
person had like some bad ideology or something like that. It's
yeah,
like, oh, that's actually really shit. Like it's all
yeah,
terrible, and then everyone else believes that it's shit because you see those
yeah.
or people are commenting the same thing, like kind of similar things. But man, like I
I
get
think that
like,
this happened yesterday. I think was it yesterday or 2 days ago where, like, one
yeah,
person posted about Tom Brady retiring, and all of a sudden, like, everyone thought Tom Brady was retiring.
yeah. He's
I'm like,
not
that
retiring? I saw it on the news, that's why I thought he retired.
yeah, no, apparently, like, he told Tampa Bay he hasn't made a decision yet.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
see,
It
that's
was
what I'm saying.
No, because I saw people posting it, and then I was it ESPN or,
Yeah,
oh, no,
it
it was NFL.com that said Tom Brady
everyone
retiring. Yeah,
everyone retracted. It's
that's
crazy.
wild.
Yeah,
Yeah, I actually didn't catch up, I was working. Oh, but
yeah,
that's crazy. Yeah, so it's fake news. Man, I'm a victim all the time too, so it's extremely unfortunate, but wow, that's
yeah,
crazy. Man. Eh, yeah, so that's okay.
yeah,
So
man.
tech companies, we gotta be aware of of fake media. So how would you say, we could combat this then? Like for news, like what are some credible sources that look at? Because I mean, I tried getting into politics, but I don't want to get myself involved at all. Just I always keep trying to keep a neutral stance just
Yeah.
because like I'm not
Well,
extremely Democratic or Republican either way. I'm kind of
yeah,
like I just you know like things that make sense and just try to help the common good.
yeah.
But
There's a website called Real Clear Politics,
real clear
and
politics.
yeah, and it's a website that aggregates news stories on politics,
Mm,
but it's like it's not biased towards any like liberal or conservatism.
yeah.
It's just like it has a sprinkle of both.
Mm,
And so you can go in there and click on articles from Fox, or you can click on them from like CNN or
yeah.
wherever. And so um at the end of the day, like, I think it's healthy to have a mixture, right?
Mhm.
Even, like, I have
Yeah.
some friends on Facebook who are really conservative and who I do not agree with on, like, 99% of things. Even on
Mhm.
Instagram, I
Yeah.
follow people who just, like, I can't stand in many
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
But I intentionally keep them in my friends or
Yeah.
in my news because I know that I need a balance,
Mhm.
even to keep and fight off the algorithm,
Yeah.
right? So, like, it throws off the algorithm if I'm, like, watching a Trump or, like, tweeting at Trump or something, like, right?
Mhm.
Like, and so I think you just need to be very conscious
Mhm.
of whether or not, like, all your news or all your information is coming from one source or one
Mhm.
side.
Yeah.
And even if you don't agree with the other side, and this is why I say we need more empathy and more
Yeah.
perspective. Just, like, read the other side,
Yeah.
and try to understand, why do these guys think there are microchips in the vaccine?
Yeah.
Like, why do they not like putting masks on? Which to me is so, like, simple. If you've ever been in Korea, which I know you have, Koreans have been wearing masks because of pollution for years.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah.
And in the US, it's, like, a huge deal.
Yeah. It's
And
more about the freedom stuff. Yeah, which
yeah,
I
yeah,
totally understand. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, to your point too. Yeah, I always try to read both sides, and
yeah,
it's the same thing in history, right? So whoever wins the war typically
writes
writes the
history.
story of like
That's
who's the
right.
good guy or not. But
That's right.
there, every war. I mean, even some of the ones that our countries have been involved in. Yeah, there's always both sides, and it's interesting to learn the history. So
Yeah.
yeah, to your point,
Just
it
have a
is important
balanced,
to
yeah,
keep.
make sure that it's like make sure your data input is not biased. It's
Yeah.
basically like the most tech way of explaining it is like
Mhm.
make sure your data input is not biased, right?
Yeah.
And you have a good balance.
Well, I'll have to check that site out. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Yeah, because
Yeah.
for me, it was like, what? Because I don't have enough time in a day.
Yeah, yeah, I get that.
And like it's like I do need to like I spend a lot of my morning to catch up on news, like what happened, and then part of it is I liked a bunch of news sites on Facebook, and
Mm,
so like CNN, Fox, and like bunch
mhm,
of other just like you said, sort of
mhm,
both
mhm.
sides of like media and like also crypto news and all the stuff. And so it I actually blocked most of my friends' news feed. I don't really care about selfies and like their dogs or baby pictures or whatever. So I don't see any of it. They're still my
Yeah,
friends. I can still talk to them on Facebook
yeah,
and
yeah.
comments and messages, but I don't see any of that. So I just see news on my feed every day.
Gotcha,
But then I am
gotcha.
afraid that even though I have both sides, that it's still going to be skew me like
Yeah,
one towards the
yeah,
other. So I have been
yeah.
relying on it a little bit less, but it was a
Especially
good time saver.
yeah. I
But that's
subscribe to
much
something
better than
called Axios.
okay.
Axios has some really good, newsletters on certain like topics, like even crypto, the
Mhm.
markets, like,
Yeah.
and they're pretty unbiased. It's a data focused newsletter. CB
Yeah.
Insights has some pretty good newsletters.
Crunchbase Insights?
CB Insights,
CB?
CB.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, yeah, and so, every morning I wake up and I have a certain, like, list of newsletters that I get every morning, and I
Yeah.
try to peruse through them,
Yeah.
and then, nothing that has an opinion in it, just, like, factual stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
then you
Yep.
can kinda deduce how you feel about certain things, but, like,
Yeah.
it just needs to be strictly factual.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think that's the important part is keep unbiased and make sure it's factual and
yeah.
yeah, this is deep, but, I
Yeah,
usually the 2 things I usually try to avoid talking about are politics and religion because I totally get both sides and,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I just wanna believe what I wanna believe, but I don't wanna
sure.
have, like, an influence on others on, like, what my thoughts are, and then
Yeah,
'cause every, individual
to
is
each their
entitled
own.
to their
Yeah,
opinion.
to
Yeah,
each their
exactly.
own. Yeah,
Um
I'm with you, I'm with you.
Yeah, so this is, yeah, but learning about more unbiased, places where I could read up on news, it's extremely helpful. So hopefully, people that listen in also think about it in a similar way too. So,
Yeah,
yeah, let's move on to topic.
yeah,
I'm curious. Yeah, so you have both, economic background from,
yeah,
just running a business as well as politics. Like, how do you feel about all this inflation that's going on? Like, just
yeah,
like, how do you think it's gonna
yeah.
like, work
So
out in the short term and long term?
I think that, the conversation around inflation is not a black or white conversation. It really depends on, like, what sector or piece of the economy you're talking about.
Yeah.
The way that I like to think about inflation is, like, the difference between, like, durable goods and non-durable goods, okay?
Hmm.
So not to get too, like, econ here, but, like, a
Hmm.
durable good is, like, something that's non-perishable,
Yep.
like metal, like physical goods that like last several years,
Yep.
right? So timber, steel, stuff like that. And then obviously a non-durable good or perishable goods like food, right? Food doesn't last very long. And so if you think about it from those two perspectives, I think, the biggest debate around inflation has been, is it transitory or is it not? Is it temporary or is it going to be long lasting?
Hmm.
And if you look at the inflation in durable goods
Hmm.
like steel, lumber, it has been transitory. Like, the
Mhm,
cost of timber and steel has come down a lot since the peak COVID, which was
mhm,
around probably May of 2021, right? So the
mhm.
price of steel, that's why you don't hear about it in the news anymore, like lumber, steel. And then
Well, I thought
you have
lumber was because of all the COVID, like, construction that was going on.
right,
So
right.
that was
That's
the
why I'm
biggest
saying, like,
driver.
at the end of the day, the demand will settle for that
Yeah.
stuff, and the price
Mhm,
will come down. And that's
mhm.
what's happened even for, like semiconductor chips, right? There's a
Yeah,
huge issue with that supply chain.
yeah.
But in the long run, like, those conditions will essentially, like, reach an equilibrium. And I do
Mhm,
think that, like, steel, lumber, and all that stuff will come down and
mhm.
inflation will settle.
Okay.
But when it comes to non-durable goods like food,
Mhm,
restaurant industry, I
mhm.
do think the inflation is here to stay.
Yeah,
And you
like
understand this
oil
from
too.
a former business owner of a restaurant.
Yeah.
Like, once you raise the price on your product, you're
Yeah,
not
there's no
gonna
going back.
lower it,
Yeah,
right? You're not gonna lower it. Like,
yeah,
are you gonna reprint on your menus so you can knock it down another 50 cents? No, of
yeah,
course not, right?
yeah,
And so I do think that if the inflation that we saw in kind of the non-durable or the perishable space, that's here to stay. So
mhm,
your average meal, like, these days I go to McDonald's and I'm,
yeah.
like, blown away by how expensive McDonald's
Oh
is.
my god, I went to Taco Bell yesterday. I've
Dude,
never paid over $10 for my meal,
dude.
and it was $15, and I was, "What the" this is Taco
Yeah,
Bell,
I
like
every time I go to Mickey D's, I'm like, "Oh my god, this used to be like a $6." The breakfast used to be
Yeah,
like a $5 meal max,
right, right.
and now I'm paying like $10 for a
Yeah,
breakfast at
it's
McDonald's.
wild.
It's insane.
Yeah,
I think that's here to stay.
yeah,
Even if, like, prices come down, like, at the end of the day, that's just more margin for
yeah,
businesses, right? They're just capturing more margins,
yeah,
even if labor costs go down or whatever, um, or the cost of goods goes down. And so I think that's here to stay.
yeah,
Um, and so we'll see. We're kind of going through this period of
yeah,
rotation here in the markets. But that's kind of my perspective. Like, in the long run,
yeah,
durable goods inflation will kind of come down. We've
yeah,
already seen that, but for non-durable goods, it's pretty much here to stay.
yeah, and this is, just me, being exposed with crypto and having a little bit of bias, but, yeah, I mean, The inflation, I think a lot of it is caused by all the money printing that was going on for the
Oh,
last few
100%.
years. But that's why I've always been really bullish on Bitcoin or something with like a finite supply of money where it can't be controlled by a single
Yeah,
Federal
man.
Reserve or some single entity on that. But um, yeah, overall though, I agree with you. I think inflation is here to stay, and it's gonna hurt the lower and middle class even more, and
Yep.
that's what's really heartbreaking. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, it's just gonna cause a bigger wealth gap and more issues than we've already had, which there was, just the amount of, millionaires and billionaires, versus how much the average person had. It was just growing constantly. Especially
Mhm.
with tech, it just becomes easier because it becomes easier to invest. It becomes easier to find resources if you're rich and, find cheaper labor and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, I do feel like this is going to be a problem for, the ever hardworking middle class too, which is very unfortunate. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. Just I guess we're aware we need to make smart decisions on it, but it's one of the reasons I'm bullish on crypto. But it's just because I mean you see all this stuff that's going on in Turkey and like
Mhm.
it used to be only like Venezuela and Zimbabwe and a certain amount of countries, but now it's just constantly growing and growing that list. And
Yeah.
they're starting to like a lot of these countries are also really pissed off about the U.S. because their currencies are back to the U.S. dollar, but U.S. ended up
Yep.
printing 50% of the
Yeah.
entire money supply in 2 years, and then their
Yeah.
countries couldn't do the same without
Yeah.
having hyperinflation. So it's just like, what the
That's right.
fuck? So now they're like, El Salvador is just resorting to
Yeah.
Bitcoin as like their legal currencies, and I
Yeah.
think more
I
of it
mean,
will continue.
the
But
U.S. We have exorbitant privilege
mhm.
because the U.S. is the world reserve currency. We're the
Yeah,
only currency where you can print like
exactly.
crazy and it won't result in hyperinflation.
Yeah.
But I also think there are limits to that, and we've really pushed the limits to that during COVID.
We've definitely pushed the boundaries to that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we exceeded that. You look at
yeah,
how much taxes you would have to collect to, pay off
yeah,
the debt that the only way we can get out is through war, right?
yeah,
And yeah, it's scary. Yeah, it's just passing the debt to our future children and grandchildren. So, but hopefully, good comes out of it. We have a lot of smart people
yeah.
working on it. So,
We'll mean revert at some point.
yeah. And I guess, yeah, just to end it off too, just,
Yeah,
with you, so you feel inflation is going to here to stay. Like, what do you think about the stock market? And I mean, a lot of, crypto too is also tanking because of, growth stocks and
yeah,
stuff are tanking. But do you think we're going to enter a multi-year bear market? Are all the funds and stuff like that pulling out their funds? Like, what do you see as, sort of,
yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the 2022 has not been great. Like the last 4 weeks of trading has been
yeah.
horrible for like every asset class.
Mhm.
My portfolio value has gone down a lot as well. And I mean, just for
Me
those
too.
who don't know what's going on, the Fed is raising rates, right? And during COVID, when rates were at zero, people were borrowing money. They were leveraging to invest and to trade and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
And because the rates are going to go back up, people are selling to cover, and that's why you're seeing this huge deleveraging in the market.
Mhm.
On one hand, I think this is a really healthy thing for the market, right? Because
Mhm.
when you have too much leverage, that's how
Yeah.
bubbles form.
Yeah.
And so I think this market pullback and correction is healthy in the long run. Do I think? Obviously, I don't know how long it's going to last, but at the end of
Yeah.
the day, once the market has priced in
Yeah.
all the rate hikes for 2022,
Yeah.
I think we'll return to a positive trajectory. So,
Yeah.
I expect us to be positive, by
Yeah.
by the second half of the year.
Yeah.
But we just don't know because the Fed won't tell us exactly how many rate hikes we're going to see this year, whether it's
Yeah.
5 or 6 or
Yeah.
3. And so that's what's causing so much uncertainty in the markets right now. And
Yeah.
so, you hodl, you buy the dips,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, you never bet against the long run, right?
Yeah.
Like you look at the S&P or whatever. Same with
Yeah.
crypto, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people were, some people were borrowing money. I know friends who like refinanced their houses to
Oof.
buy crypto,
Yeah.
and I was like, I cringed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so that's what's happening. There's this deleveraging
Yeah.
that's happening in both the crypto space and the equity space, and it's a healthy thing in my
Yeah.
view. It's going to be a little painful for the next, at least I think, at
Yeah.
least through March.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of painful, but
Yeah.
if you have some cash on hand, you buy at the right time. At the end of the year, you'll come out on top. Yeah,
This is not financial advice, right?
no, this is not financial advice. Yes, this is just one man's perspective.
Yeah. But no, I agree. I mean, I think even if rates do go up, I mean, like, I mean, I've been trading stocks and options since, like, the last recession was, like, 2009, 10, and
Right.
then, Every time the Federal Reserve said that they're gonna raise rates, they've backed out. I don't think this time they can back out just because so
Yeah.
much money is now in the air. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like, they're gonna try to mitigate that and to try to make the markets, go up healthy and, it's just you don't you don't you don't bet against that. But I mean, bond rates, in the 70s and 80s, like you could have seen bond rates going up to like 10% or 8%. But
Crazy.
I don't think we'll ever see that,
Yeah.
in the next decade or so. So it's just
Yeah.
okay if bond rates are gonna be like 1 or 2%, even if rates do go up,
There's no
where
alternative
are you gonna
other than
where are you gonna
yeah.
put your money if inflation's
Yeah.
at 7%? Like, and
Exactly.
so all the funds and, and my god, I've been talking to so many VCs and, funds recently for, other stuff, but, they're saying that there's been a record level of, new funds coming in, and there's
Yeah.
so much capital to deploy, and they're just right now on the sidelines
You're
because
losing like
things are uncertain.
7%. If you're
Yeah,
sitting on cash, you're basically losing 7%. You
exactly.
know,
So
the S&P average return annually is 7%. So
yeah,
even if you put it in equities, you're breaking even.
exactly. Yeah,
So it's forcing people to take more risks for
more
higher
riskier. Yeah,
returns because we're in a high inflationary environment. So a lot of what's
yeah,
happening right now makes total sense.
yeah,
Um, but
yeah.
what the conclusion of all this is like, I dude, it's anyone's guess,
Yeah, no one knows.
Yeah,
But yeah, we'll see. I mean, yeah,
interesting
I'm just
time.
a buyer and hodler.
Yes, diamond hands, right?
Yeah, diamond hands. Just I do tend to avoid shit, like, in terms of, like, something okay, some things might go up, for
Yeah,
whatever reason, because it's trendy or whatnot, but I do tend to look at financials and stuff like,
yeah, of
I
course.
don't
The
wanna
fundamentals
specifically
are
say, like,
still
which
important.
companies, but, like, yeah, just so you look at public financials, man, like, man, this technology is not going to make it in the next
Yeah,
decade because of all these other things that are coming up.
yeah,
Their quarterly financials are seeing every single quarter, and like stocks at record high, like CEOs and CFOs are dumping like 100% of their shares. I'm like,
yeah, man.
even if it goes 10x, like I'm not gonna regret missing out on that because it could
Yeah,
go down just as fast or if not worse. And like just
yeah,
I think that's
totally.
a
And
discrepancy.
you can't time the market, so
Yeah, it's
yeah,
impossible. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But
totally with
yeah.
you on that.
But yeah, anyway, yeah, thanks for, coming on. And yeah, this is a very deep conversation from politics to entrepreneurship to
I love it.
inflation and economics. And yeah, we gotta do this again. But
Absolutely. Anytime,
yeah,
brother.
awesome. Yeah,
Thanks for
thanks,
having
Sam.
me.
And then how do
All right.
people follow you or add you on LinkedIn and stuff if
Yeah, yeah, I'm
you're
on
interested?
LinkedIn. You can find me if you search Sam H Cho. My Twitter is Sam Cho Tweets. And my Instagram is Sam H Cho, no spaces. Yeah, follow me.
Cool. All right. Thanks,
All
Sam.
right. All right, man.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.